So I'll be your host for this evening. I would like to welcome Professor Ziegler. He's Professor Emeritus at the Technion Department of Mathematics, formerly Dean of the Graduate School at the Technion, and holder of the Jaffa Chair in Mathematics. Currently, Professor Ziegler is the chairman of the Inter-Senate Committee, head of the Inter-University Forum to combat the academic boycotts. Please welcome him.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming, and thanks the INSS and the Jewish Federations for hosting this event. And special thanks are due to the editors of this compendium, the professors Cary and Gabriel Brahm, a compendium which has dozens of very good essays and excellent source material that will really serve all people who want to combat academic boycotts in the US especially. It's geared to the American audience mostly. What I would like to do is to give you an overview of academic boycotts. As they progress over time, they are evolving. They started in one way. They're changing directions and changing contents somewhat. And I'd like to take you back to the beginning. It's a story. It's a story that's about 12 and a half years old. And the beginning. So where is the beginning? The beginning was the end of the Second Intifada. You probably, all of you recall, there was a very bloody Intifada with many terrorist attacks. And the last attack, which really caught everybody's eye and enraged all Israelis, happened in the Park Hotel massacre on the Seder night on the 27th of March 2002. This forced Israel to react. The Israeli government decided to embark on defensive shield, Chomat Magen operation, meant to destroy the infrastructure of terrorism in the West Bank, from where the terrorists who used to come and used to find safe haven. The operation was not clinical and not surgical. It was a bloody operation, like most such operations are. Watch Tzuk Eitan or Kasled. Many Israelis died in the fighting, and many Palestinians died, including non-combatants, including civilians, including children. And the propaganda machine of the Palestinians started the next day. You remember Jenin? I don't know if all of you remember what happened, but the same kind of stories happened that happened now after Tzuk Eitan, happened at that point. And they aroused a lot of indignation in other countries who listened and thought there might be some truth in what people were saying. Jenin was a subject that is very touchy. A week later, on April 6, 2002, two Jewish professors in the UK, Hillary and Stephen Rose, wrote a letter to The Guardian. In a letter to The Guardian, they proposed a total moratorium on research and academic collaboration between Europe in general and UK in particular, and Israel. The letter was well received among certain circles in the UK. There were, in a very short time, there were 700 signatures calling for this moratorium. This is really the start of the academic boycott activity. There were, of course, counter letters, and numbers were even larger, close to 1,000. But this was the beginning. This started the academic boycott activity in the UK. It was mainly restricted to the UK for a number of years, and I'm going to have some points that are relevant and can teach us something about what's happening today in the US, because the history not exactly repeats itself. History never does, but it teaches lessons, and you can see how things are evolving. 3 months after, and there are 2 incidents in the UK which can teach us something about what we should do and what can be done and what is being done sometimes. By maybe in the questions or in the mingling, I'll talk in more detail about that. But the first incident that caught everybody's eye was Mona Baker. Again, let me summarize in two or three sentences. Mona Baker was an editor-in-chief of a translation journal. She taught in the University of Manchester. And she, as a result of this campaign, decided that she doesn't want any Israeli editors on her editorial board. So she disinvited them to join the that's the word she used. She said she doesn't want Israelis. She respects them. She thinks they are good scholars. She has no complaints, but they are Israelis. So go out. And this, of course, was not really welcome news for Israelis and for many academics in the US, and in the UK, I'm sorry. And a campaign against Mona started, but at that time, the anti-boycott campaign was really not very well organized, and her decision stayed. The complaints to the University of Manchester didn't work out because the university said it's a private publishing house. In fact, it was owned by a family of Mona Baker, and they cannot do anything about it. And it stayed there, and the people were not on the editorial board. Because we were not really organized. Nobody was really ready for such an onslaught. A year later, there was another incident, and that had repercussions, and it's really a very important event in the history of the anti-boycott movement, or the boycott movement, both. A graduate student from Tel Aviv University by name of Amit Dufshani wanted to do his doctoral work in the UK, in Oxford University. He wrote to one of the renowned professors of biology in Oxford, a name of St. Andrew Wilkie, and requested a place in his lab. Professor Wilkie wrote it back, said he has no opinion on the scholarly value of this applicant, but there is no way I would welcome in my lab a person who served in the Israeli army. So that's a quote. And this was, of course, in breach of all anti-discrimination laws, in breach of the ethics, the Code of Ethics of Oxford University, and the uproar went up to the sky. I mean, the professors in the Oxford University, professors outside of the university, professors from Israel, everybody was up against this decision. And the Oxford University, which is a major university, very honorable one, decided to have a disciplinary court for Andrew Wilkie. The results were announced a couple of months later, not years later, a couple of months later in October, and they suspended Professor Wilkie without pay and took away his rights to supervise students for 2 months, and sent him to an equal opportunity training course. Not bad. The case was publicized, we got a lot of attention, and it really served as something that we should remember, because those things happen today. I'll tell you maybe in the last few minutes of the talk. Those things happen today, but they happen on a lower key, and whenever they happen, the way to do it is to fight. Is to fight, is to bring it to the disciplinary courts. Nobody should be allowed to use to abuse academic power. Person has the power to accept students, to teach students. He doesn't have absolute power. He has to obey certain ethical rules that are binding for universities. So that's a case that is quoted. The case really shuts the door on abuses of that sort in the UK. But the campaign against Israel continued. A year later, this infamous organization, PACBI, Palestinian Campaign for Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel, was formed, and they allied themselves with leftists in the trade union. A trade union of all teachers of the older universities, first in England, in the UK, then later it was changed a little bit, but and that people in England call them the Trotskyite segment of the trade union. But the trade union decided a year later, in 2005, to boycott two Israeli universities, Haifa University and Bar-Ilan University. For reasons that it's not the time to talk about the reasons, but the decision was taken on a Jewish holiday without proper preparation, and the result was that many people objected on procedural grounds. Some others objected to the contents. It was not well prepared. There were many objections to the resolution, and it was revoked a month later. But it was revoked not totally and absolutely. It was revoked temporarily. They said they would discuss it a year later. Now, this really made news in Israel and in academic communities of Israel, because at that point we felt, Israeli academics felt, that it's one for all for one. They target Haifa University and Bar-Ilan on one pretext. Tomorrow they'll target somebody else. Israeli academy should stand up for its principles and should fight against this resolution. Maybe I don't know how to do that, but I will manage, I'm sure. Just a second. Here. Up. Okay. Okay. This okay?
Yeah, this one.
Right. Oh, okay. Thank you. The senates are the main academic bodies of universities in Israel. All senates of all Israeli research universities voted for the resolution that you can see in front of you. The resolution was passed essentially unanimously on all universities. There were a couple of abstentions here and there. There was nobody opposing it, because the resolution as it stands has universalist principles. It goes to the heart of the matter. It doesn't talk about Israeli policies. It doesn't talk about whether Israel is right or wrong. It says boycotting academic institutions causes serious harm to the scientific endeavor and to human progress, and therefore it's a no-no. One shouldn't do that. And then in paragraph 3, you can see that the Senate wanted other people, other organizations to join us in that. There were thousands of letters, literally, written by university professors in Israel to their colleagues in the UK, asking them to object to the academic boycott in their trade unions, because that was the way we thought was proper. This was done. Thousands of letters were sent. There were the model letters that circulated, but people signed their own names on a personal letter to people they knew personally. The National Academy of Sciences of the US, the American Academy of Sciences, National Academy of New York, Polish National Academy, many such groups, the Royal Society, the president of the Royal Society at that time, Lord Rees, and many other august organizations, the most important organizations in academic life, endorsed that kind of letter. I'll show you now, if I can do it. Just a second. Okay, here you go. Is it okay? Yeah. The ICSU, or International Council of Science, is an umbrella body that most of the academic national academies of science in the Western world and some others belong to. It's like the UN or of academies of science. It's a joint organization. It's a very important organization, and that is the principle. It's a guiding principle for us. It should be the guiding principle for all academic people or academic organizations. It says, you can read it, but it says there is the Council opposes any discrimination on the basis of such factors as ethnic origin, religion, citizenship, language, and political stance, and gender, sex, or age. So it includes ethnic origin, citizenship, and political stance. So it includes, by that rule, boycotting Israelis because they are Israelis is wrong. Because boycotting Israelis because they hold an opinion that you don't agree with is totally wrong, etc. So that was very helpful. It was very helpful. It helped mobilize the scientific community in Israel and in other countries. There was a huge supporting group in the U.S. People refused, said that they were sort of virtually belonging to Israeli institutions. If you boycott Israelis, you boycott them. There were many Nobel Prize winners that did that, and it was very successful. The resolution came again to a vote in the UK several times, and every time it was defeated. They changed the rules. At one point, they wanted to boycott only Israelis. Boycott all Israelis except those who vocally criticize the Israeli government. And that was a McCarthy-type rule. You know, you have to show your credentials. You have to show that you are, you behave in the right way and have the right thoughts, and then you are not boycotted. But every time in 2005 and 6 and 7, they voted for and then canceled. The story is quite interesting, but I'm not going to, of course, go into the details. In 2008. In 2008, we wrote letters to, after all those discussions, we wrote letters to all the major British universities, to the vice chancellors thereof, and asked them to commit themselves to an anti-boycott stance. And we got fabulous letters from the chair of the Russell Group, which is like our Vera. It's 24 major universities of Britain, and Universities UK, which is all the rest. And both of them wrote letters I have copies of, and the letters were absolutely on the dot. They were really fabulous letters. You know, they can be quoted and quoted again. They were very strongly against academic boycotts for the same reasons that outlined here. We have the letters. We used them this summer when, if I managed to get to the talk, there were a couple of incidents where people breached the ethos of academic conduct in the UK, and we wrote the vice chancellors. We quoted the letters. We got again a reassurance, and we got a statement that the vice chancellor, which is like the president of America, is totally against and will try to enforce it as much as he can in his own university, which is excellent. So it's ammunition in an arsenal of fighting boycotts, of fighting real implementation of boycotts, not theory, not declarations. That's different. But if somebody acts in a way that's a breach of academic conduct, he is going to be disciplined. That's the message, very important message. The situation kind of stabilized in the UK after Kast-led, authority Tzukah for Israelis, after Kast-led, the emotions flared again, and there were again calls for boycotts, but nothing really happened in the sense of an organization boycotting Israel. Individuals were not happy with what Israel was doing. We all remember that. That's I guess an English understatement. The next incident that was kind of organizational happened in Norway in 2009. In 2009, in Trondheim, the Norwegian Institute of Technology or something, they had, I don't remember the exact name, I have it, but many faculty members wrote a letter to the board asking for a boycott of Israel and academic boycott. And was a counter pressure. I mean, academics in Norway, academics outside, Israelis, Americans, English, many academics outside campaigned very strongly against this motion, and the board decided unanimously that academic boycotts are something that is totally wrong, and they're not going to commit to that. That was 2009. And in Israel, it seemed like everything was getting sort of stabilized. There is some boycott here and there. There is a silent boycott, not open boycott, not organizational boycott, but things sort of seemed to be under control, generally. But the movement, this BDS movement and the PACBI, were preparing new surprises. And they changed their tactics and changed their location. They moved to America. America is the best ally Israel has. America is extremely important to us. America is a very active, vibrant society. It discusses, it talks. That's the arena they chose. They started by choosing BDS, and still continues. The BDS is boycott, divest, and sanction. And maybe I don't know. I'm not such an expert in that. BDS. The goals of BDS are, I rephrased it, but that's the content. There are three paragraphs: ending the occupation and colonization of Arab lands, dismantling the wall, what we call the security barrier, or they call the wall, equal rights for Palestinian citizens, Arab Palestinian citizens, and the right of return. Now, every Israeli and most Jews that care for Israel knows that accepting those demands is the end of Israel as we know it, and many people don't know. Many people are not aware that really what the BDS is after is not just ending the occupation, or not just, peace, Israel and Arab. It's for the right of return. But they started, and they didn't target individual academics. Rather, they were targeting. First, they started the divestment. Divestment has been quite successful in America. Not sanctions, but divestment has been quite successful. Presbyterian Church, all kinds of others. There were factories, and there was a case of in Wesleyan. There are many cases of divestment, particular cases of divestment in the States, but they have nothing to do with academic boycott. They have to do with the BDS, but not with academic boycotts. And they worked, and the Israelis Israeli academics shrugged their shoulders. They said, well, okay, sanctions, divestment is a different story. It's not academic boycotts. But under the radar, those things happened. And you will hear more about what's happening in America from our colleagues from America, from Professor Nelson, Professor Brahm, and Professor Tron. the campuses became fertile ground for anti-Israeli propaganda and for efforts at severing ties with Israeli academia. In 2013, that means a year ago, the tactics shifted, and they went to professional associations, not trade unions, professional associations. That means, like there were 3 of them in 2013. American Asian Studies Association, American Indian and Indigenous People Association, and the American Studies Association. American Studies Association is the largest by far of the 3. It was about 5,000 people or so, and they voted to have some kind of boycott against Israel. Now, the boycott they proposed, that was in December of last year, the boycott they proposed was not boycotting Israeli academics, because that didn't work in England and they were aware of that. They wanted to boycott Israeli institutions, and they wanted to boycott Israelis whose travel, say they want to come to America and talk at the conference. If their travel money comes from an Israeli institution, they are boycotted, and things like that. Now, that's, of course, a camouflage and a myth. And in the book, you have one of the English fighters against boycott, David Hirsch, writes about the myth of institutional boycotting. It's almost all people in all universities worldwide don't go with their own money to a conference. They get support from their institution. They get support from funding agencies that belong. Yeah, okay. But that resolution passed. The resolution passed, and it was a wake-up call for Israeli academia that was sort of dormant for a few years. About half a year later, it takes time, half a year later, the Association of University Heads, which is VERA, decided to appoint a forum, a committee, to combat academic boycotts, and I was appointed head. Ilan Tron here with back and forth from America and Israel is a member of that forum. And the forum started by collecting facts. We wanted fact-finding. We wanted to find out what is there a boycott, what is happening in the boycott, and so on. We sent the questionnaires to a letter asking for information to all professors in the universities, asking for instances of discrimination, for knowledge of personal knowledge of a boycott activity. And the findings were quite interesting. The findings were that in what's called STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, there are almost no cases of boycott, almost none, or none, in fact. There were a few cases in the social sciences and humanities, and we dealt with those. We dealt by persuading people, by writing their vice chancellors, as I said, and so on. But the one type of anti-Israeli, anti-Israeli academy action that is quite common and is not so rare is people refusing to come to conferences in Israel. That is very common. Some very good people from the UK, from America, some are not coming to a conference in this country because they don't like it, they support the boycott, whatever. They don't like to come. So some of the conferences here that were planned well in advance, people refused after Tzuk Eitan, most of them, but there were many refusals. It's a phenomenon. It's not a breach of academic contact, so it's harder to fight, but it is a phenomenon that we should fight. But let me just go back, go further. I have 3 minutes? 2, 3? Just a second. No, just a second. I'll just go to that. We were involved over the summer in the last few months in certain events that happened. I put them on the board. I don't know if you could, it doesn't matter. The plus means that it was half resolved. No, the tilt means it's half resolved. The plus means that there was a reaction that worked. The University of Cape Town, in a country that's totally anti-Israeli, the vice chancellor of that university was courageous enough to make a decision, anti-academic boycotts. Total. And the rest, City University of New York, etc. I just finished with one more slide. I don't want to go that. Let's see if I can find it. I can scroll it. Okay. So there are several alternative approaches to fight the boycott, in our opinion. There is a principled universalist approach, which is like the Senate resolution and the ICSU, the International Council of Science. There is a fair play approach. It says, why single out Israeli academia and not, I don't know, Chinese or Iranian or whatever. The utilitarian approach, which says that the boycott is counterproductive, it destroys bridges, it hurts the people who build bridges. The academia is the most cooperative and the most inclined to build bridges. And setting the record straight, which is exposing false allegations and showing that Israel's behavior is much better than depicted by opponents. We are basically using the principled universalist approach and sometimes the utilitarian, and setting the record straight only as far as Israeli academia is concerned. We are not agents of government. We don't support or object to government policies. Israeli universities, mind you, are independent institutions. They don't take directions or directives or orders from anybody, and we are not involved in the political game at all. But we are involved very strongly in setting the record straight as far as academia is concerned. So we are here. We are trying to work. It's doable. We can fight. I think if we muster all forces, if we collaborate right, we can win the struggle. Thank you very much.